I'm currently on a cruise where I'm staying in a cabin that has not changed in 22 years. I booked a quirky cabin type 2 that most people don't know is an option, and it's certainly not a cabin that you'll see the cruise lines advertise. Usually when I cruise, I'm more than happy with an inside cabin. I stayed in an inside cabin on a very similar ship a few years ago, and it was totally fine. Not great, but fine. I like to cut costs where I can, and I usually can't justify the balcony upgrade price. When booking this cruise though, I came across a third option, something that I hoped would be better than an inside cabin, but that wouldn't be as expensive as the standard balcony. The ship I'm currently on, Carnival Miracle, has over 1,000 cabins, and I booked what is called a guaranteed balcony cabin, which was $130 per person cheaper than the standard balcony. That meant that I would get at least a balcony of some sort, but I could be anywhere on the ship. It basically meant that I would be given the leftover cabins, and it could be one with any number of downsides. I knew that my cabin could have some sort of obstruction to the view because it did mention that, but I didn't know if that meant that I'd have something small in the way or I would be just staring directly at a wall for 7 days. It could have gone either way. Looking at the deck plan, I could see that 66 of the balcony cabins were marked as obstructive view, so there was a very high chance that I would get one of those. I didn't know if I would get a cabin in a noisy location or one where I would feel more movement, but I do like to take the risk. Pre-cruise, I'd read a lot of reviews and a couple had mentioned the cabins being dirty or scruffy. Given the ship's age, I wouldn't be surprised by that, but I hoped that it wouldn't be the case. Outdated is totally fine by me, but dirty is something else entirely. It wasn't until I checked in for the cruise and downloaded my luggage tags that I found out where my cabin was. I saw on the labels cabin 5228 and I went straight to Carnival's website to have a look. I found my cabin towards the back of deck 5 and looking at the photos of the ship, it looked as though we would be right behind the lifeboats. All of the pictures and the videos that I could find of this cabin online were pretty old, and I thought to myself, surely they've updated the cabin since then, but it turns out they really haven't changed much at all. This cabin has been like staying in 2003 for a week, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We have had some problems though, and I have missed some things. When we boarded the ship, we found it very easy to find our room because the signs were big and very obvious. I love how clearly here it says even and odd. The decor in the corridors is a little overwhelming, but it was nothing compared to the rest of the ship. Subtle is not a word that I would use to describe the Carnival Miracle. Our cabin, on the other hand, was actually quite relaxing in comparison, and when I entered the room, it felt light, it felt comfortable. It was colourful, sure, but I didn't feel the need to wear my sunglasses inside like I did in some of the other spaces around. I noticed straight away that we'd been given a double bed, but as I was cruising with my brother, I knew that I'd have to ask them to change that. I phoned housekeeping later in the day on the cabin phone, and they came around to change the beds into 2 twins for us. The beds split like this on almost all cruise ships, and I knew that they did here because I was asked pre-cruise how I would like the beds and I said twins. That message didn't get through to the ship though, which I think is a shame because the last thing that I want to do is to make more work for the housekeeping team. They work so hard and they have a lot of cabins to clean. I'm not sure if this art on the walls is falling over surfboards or bananas, but I did like it. These are definitely not the 2003 originals. The lights at the top around the edges are though, and I thought that those were fun. It looked a bit outdated, but honestly I quite like it. It's like icing around the top of a cake. Things like these lamps and this light on the mirror, they're not to my taste, but the world would be very boring if we all liked the same things. Generally, the cabin did look a bit grubby with marks on the walls and bits that looked discoloured on the lamps and the other materials. I think this is just what a 22-year-old lamp does look like though, and it's pretty impressive that it's still going, honestly. It wouldn't take much though to change out the lamps. I had heard some rumours that these lamps would have USBs in them, but we did not have any luck with that, they're just regular lamps. I headed out straight away onto the balcony to have a look at our obstruction. I was so happy to see that we had a clear view out at the horizon, and it was only really when looking down that we missed out on anything. The lifeboat never came up above the barrier, and even when I was sat down, I still had a view out. When I was sitting on the sofa, I could not see the lifeboat at all because it was behind the bed. Looking to the side, inside, I saw that some cabins had more of an obstructive view with the privacy barriers, and some had metalwork which came up higher, so I do think that we got quite lucky here. I wasn't sure if I'd miss out on anything happening directly below on the ocean, but I doubted it. The balcony itself has 2 chairs on it and a little table. It definitely isn't the biggest balcony I've had by a long stretch, but for the 2 of us, it was fine for us to sit out here. We did have to move the chairs so that we could open the door, but overall it was fine. If there were any more of you, you would have to share this space by standing in a very orderly line. This cabin does hold 3 because this sofa is a sofa bed. Coming back into the cabin, I headed over to the desk with the wall of mirrors. These made the cabin feel so bright and open. I'm sure they've had to replace a lot of mirrors on this ship in the last 22 years. Carnival Miracle was built in 2003, and yes, that is 22 years ago, if you can believe it, even longer if you're watching this in the future. The big mirror had lights around it, and the lighting was really good here. Often on old ships you'll find that the lights flicker for a while before they come on, but there was none of that. It made me feel as though I was in a dressing room backstage at a theatre. On the desk was a phone, 2 plug sockets, and some $4.75 bottles of water. I usually do drink the tap water when I cruise, but it only took me 1 mouthful of the water in this tap to realise that it tastes like a pond, to be honest. So I would normally just go to the buffet, it's free, the water's there, and I would bring it back down. There were 2 plug sockets on the desk and 2 extra USBs in the lamp that's over above the sofa. I assume that this one is a new addition, but that is it for the power. It was totally fine for us because I had an adapter where we could charge multiple things off of 1 plug. It's definitely worth bringing an adapter like this because the plug sockets were so close together that you definitely couldn't use 2, and this is something that does catch people out. Apparently, to catch you out is a Britishism. I had no idea about that one. I often make lists of things that will catch you out on a cruise, and what I mean by that is things that will sort of lead you into a mistake. If someone told you that there were 2 plug sockets on here, you might assume that you could use both, but you'll be caught out when you realise that you can't. Under the desk, there's lots of drawers and the all-important bits and bobs drawer for the general stuff that you need on a cruise. There was a fridge under here too with nothing in it, and the door to that one that did not close properly. Looking closer at it, it looks as though one of the hinges is broken. These cabinets and these wardrobes are 2003 originals, so I do think they deserve a bit of slack, but I'm sure that something like this could be fixed relatively easily. Another thing that seemed very old-fashioned to me that I've actually never seen on a cruise before was that the safe under the TV was operated by card. It says to swipe your credit card, but I didn't do that. I'm sure any card with the magnetic strip would work, hopefully. Usually you just set your own PIN and you just type that in. There are some shallow cupboards on the other side underneath this dinosaur, but we didn't use these during the cruise. We had far more space than things, and I didn't even use my bedside table at all. The TV is not a 2003 original, that's for sure, but that's one of the only things that has changed in this cabin. That said though, I don't think this TV is new. I'm thinking more 2010 rather than 2003, but I guess if it isn't broke, there's no point in fixing it. It doesn't have any smart features at all, it is just a loop of some TV channels. The walls in the cabin are slightly textured, but it is nothing compared to the river cruise cabin I had once, where the walls were padded and patterned. I'm sure patterned walls are slightly more forgiving to scuffs and scratches than if you had a plain colour. Opposite the desk is a sofa and a table. It's definitely showing its age, but it wasn't dirty, just worn. It was here that I set up my office for the week, and it mostly worked well, for the most part. I did buy a Wi-Fi package so that I could keep up with the video calls and the work that I needed to do for my company, the Cruise Globe. We've just passed 30,000 users, which is pretty incredible. That is enough to fill this ship 14 times. It is completely free to use and it is so much fun, so check it out if you haven't already. Here is the route that I took on this cruise as shown on my Cruise Globe. You can create videos just like this for your cruises too. The Wi-Fi worked well on this cruise and I never had any problems doing my work. The video calls did buffer sometimes, but they sometimes do that when I'm at home. I bought the highest internet package, which cost me $196, so you would hope that it would work. The biggest problem I had with doing calls here was that the air conditioning is right beside me and it would turn on and off whenever it felt like it. It was almost as though it was always going, but every so often it would get a massive burst of energy and it would start going full power. On the control panel here, there isn't any way to turn it off. That wasn't a problem for us for the rest of the cruise, but the whistling while trying to do video calls was a bit more tricky. I was tempted to move, to take my laptop and to do the calls in the bathroom, maybe on the toilet, but that would have been an even worse idea. It was around now that our luggage arrived. The embarkation had taken us 3 hours, so I actually didn't unpack until the next day, which is pretty unheard of for me. I usually like to be organised, but food was a much higher priority. The part that I was most nervous about with this cabin was the bathroom. I'd read some bad reviews, and bathrooms do tend to show their age. In terms of space, the bathroom was a fairly good size, the shower tray was nice and high so the water didn't spill out of it, and there was plenty of space by the sink to put our things. The shower worked well and the temperature control was good. We each had a bath towel, but I decided to use the blue towel for the pools instead, just because it was bigger and I didn't plan on going in the pools anyway. The bathroom did look run down and grotty in a few places, but it definitely had been cleaned. The vent thing above the toilet was gross and it did blow air all the time. It was actually louder, I think, than the air conditioning. Our cabin steward did go above and beyond with the towel animals. Every day when we came back to the room, there would be somebody new waiting for us. You can see them here now, sitting around me. It's like a zoo in here, but a zoo where I don't know exactly what the animals are. Let me know what you think this one is, because I'm not sure. All of the housekeeping team was so friendly, as were all of the crew on board. It's not a normal thing to have your waiters dance for you in the restaurants, but on here they do. Back in the bathroom there is a shower curtain, and shower curtains are a bit disappointing, but it is what it is. It is not the end of the world, and it mostly kept itself to itself. They couldn't really change this without changing the entire bathroom. When we headed to bed, we put the do not disturb sign on the door and we closed the curtains. The curtains were very good at blocking out the light, which was good because we could see lights from other people's balconies if we were out there. I loved coming out here at night though, because views like this are just so amazing. This is exactly what cruising is about for me. One thing that I loved about this cabin at night was that there was a night light over by the wardrobes. This was motion activated, so when I went to the toilet at night, it would light up my way. I wish that all cruise ships had something similar. The next morning we unpacked and I put my suitcase into the bottom of the wardrobe. We had 2 full wardrobe sections with loads of hanging space, but almost all of my clothes fit on these 2 shelves. I travel light normally, and Carnival are a pretty casual cruise line, which meant that I didn't have any formal wear. Carnival do offer room service, but it is at a charge, so I didn't try that during this cruise. We were only 3 decks below the buffet though, so it wasn't a far walk if we did want something to eat. We didn't get to pick our deck, but deck 5 was pretty perfect. The main areas inside the ship were down on decks 2 and 3, and the pools were up on deck 9, so we were right in the middle. If I could have chosen a deck, this probably would have been the one that I would have chosen anyway. Being a little bit set into the side of the ship was good too, because we hardly felt any movement here. I never heard anybody being noisy in the corridors, and to be honest, I was probably the one being noisy in the corridors, because every time I walked past the door that had these magnets on it, I had to stop and read them out. Guests on Carnival love decorating their doors, and it's just one of the things that makes Carnival cruises unique. That said, I don't really think Carnival are a cruise line that suits me and the way that I cruise. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss out on the full video from this trip, and in the meantime check out this video from a Carnival cruise that I took out of New York City. It was quite an experience, and I'll see you there in a few minutes.